going to go wrong. But if you give it to someone that knows what they're doing, then you have more chance of having good results.
Yes, yes. The same thing can be said about philosophy. Philosophy is also a tool. It is a tool. It is a tool that is kind of needed for science. I think the going back.
Well, all of science relies on philosophy. And
Oh
when
yeah.
you look at it, it's all a methodology that's based on unprovable claims. Like, for example, we have to take on axiom, or like some atheists could say, on faith, that there is an external reality that we can learn something about. We can't prove that to be true. There's no scientific way to determine that is true, but we have to take it on as an axiom in order to do science. So there's a whole lot of philosophical claims you have to do, and when you even get out of that basic step of philosophy, the whole thing of doing repeated tests like imperialism and the whole other methodology is rested, you can't justify the method on the method itself. You have to take an axiom for it and get to the other conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, the most common axiom used within science, I would think, is Occam's Razor, but it's slowly proving to that's not always the best way, because reality is complicated. It's complex. You can't boil it down to its simplest term always.
Yeah. And like I said, what's funny is that atheists tend to use Occam's Razor to say, well, the simplest conclusion is that there is no God. And I say, you do realize that Occam was a theist, right?
Well, yeah, and there being a god, a ultimate intelligence that is running everything, that's more simplistic than everything just appearing from nothing, and nothing not being the actual. I don't think nothing actually exists anywhere, but because that's one of the few things that our imaginations can't actually imagine is pure nothingness. It's something that our human brains cannot actually fathom.
Well, as Aristotle once said, nothing is what rocks dream about.
Yeah. I mean,
we can't do it, but a rock can dream it.
Yeah, I mean, there's. I can see that. I mean, there's a lot of weird things that that I've noticed about in this conversation. Not our specific conversation, but the overall conversation based around the oldest question in human history: is there a God? It's a fascinating thing to look at history, because like cave painting.
It's deeply rooted into our psychology. If you could, like, we don't know exactly, of course, when humans first started believing. Of course, our archaeology is very limited to the very scraps we can find. But we can say that for the longest time, humans have believed in God. Being an atheist is sort of abnormal. It's it's more we tend to believe more in a God that does something. And while there was fallacious attempts of trying to explain away or trying to describe certain events, a lot of religions tend to have that ultimate guiding reality force, which we call God. I consider my deistic position to be of the properly basic variety. It's a properly basic belief. It is a belief grounded in experience and reinforced through philosophy and history. I came, after I recently posted on my channel, Brass Wisdom, that my Mr. Brass channel, that my deconversion story, where I discussed, how I came to be a deist. I recommend people check it out if they want to learn more about me, and they generally just want to know, how I see deism or what are my stances are. I get asked this sometimes by people, like, why did I call my channel Brass Wisdom? And, and why do I go by Mr. Brass? Well, I consider it sort of like a Socratic name. Because we all know about brass rings. Brass rings are like the things that you get on your way to the top, but you never quite reach it. You just get all these brass rings. While wisdom I put in there is, so when I put Brass Wisdom, it's me grabbing just the nuggets of wisdom that I can put into my brain, but I ultimately realize I will never be as philosophically depth as I want to be. So I can only handle the scraps of the philosophy. So I call myself Brass Wisdom. If that makes sense, of course.
No, that makes sense. That makes complete sense to me. I mean, there's. I mean, it's very interesting, really.
Mm-hmm.
Your channel is very. I enjoy your content. I think you should post it more on the Escaping Atheism Facebook group. More of your videos and stuff. That's just my opinion, but
all right, I'll make sure to do that more often.
Because it's very enjoyable stuff, and I like.
I actually got a video prepared that it's going to be in a different sort of format. It's going to be more in a presentation style format where, because I don't want my channel to be exclusively debunking atheist dogma and BS. Although I will be doing that, don't get me wrong. But I also don't want that to be the only thing.
It's also
it's also going to be about me and, my journey as a deist, and it's going to be about my philosophical stances. And I might just try to call out some religious, false religious dogmas, because I want to have intellectual conversations about things that I see are problems. I'm
sorry.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I'm a free range person where, if I find that there is some inconsistencies or that there is some overall problem that needs to be discussed, I recommend people, tell me, what should I discuss, and I will try to just go, I'll try to do my best to go against anybody. If it's a bad argument, it's a bad argument no matter who it comes from.
Yeah, that is very true. I mean, I kind of find debunking atheist content to be boring, me personally. But that's because I've been working on this video, and I just don't want to do it. Dealing with Grim Jim's atheism #atheism videos and his starting videos of I'm going to debunk everything Max says, even though it's a group of people that he's talking
to. Grim Jim, you mean Aaron, the bootleg Aaron Raw?
Yeah.
Bootleg British Aaron Raw?
Yeah. Pretty much.
You know, I watched some of his content, and he says absolutely zero that's original. Like once you get past the the typical atheist catchphrases, the bad history, the bad cultural knowledge of the Bible and stuff, you can pretty much, 90% of atheist channels become redundant. They all work like a hive mind, which I find funny because they say they're rational people. With I put the trademark symbol in that. They pretty much operate as a hive mind that I've noticed, and they don't have any original thoughts for the most part.
Well,
Like once you know the catchphrases and once you know the dogma, you can predict almost with good accuracy what they're going to say.
well, yeah, that's what makes it, very much a provable ideology, in my opinion. Is being able to you look at it and it's like, well, you know, no, what you're saying is kind of that doesn't seem right. It because a lot of them just talk out of their ass, to be honest. Like we talked about it privately before. What's her name? Bionic Dance.
Yeah.
Bionic Dance did a video that says, atheists aren't seen properly because theists, trash on atheism, and it follows the American Atheist Association's um, narrative that theistic oppression is why a lot of non-believers, is why out of 22% in America that are non-believers, only 5% actually say I'm an atheist. They criticize the religious nuns and stuff like that by saying, hey, these people are oppressed by theists to think that we're bad, and it's like, no, no, these people just look at your content, look at what you say, and it's like, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah. To me personally, like to quote another atheist, atheism is unstoppable. Bionic Dance is an idiot. Quoting him directly from that, I would much rather have a stroke than watch her content because and hell, I feel that I could produce a more better philosophical video in a stroke like stance than she could using her full capacity. Um, she has she has bad animation. She doesn't know history, and unlike Jacqueline Glenn, she doesn't even have the the model looks in order to get her some views from 40-year-old men. She doesn't even have that going for her. So
Yeah, I mean, I would, I would agree. I mean, it's mostly her. It what I don't like about her is mainly she is really essentially just repeating what better people have said
yeah,
for profit,
um,
type of thing.
yeah,
A lot of them do that, and it's one of the big reasons why I joined the Escaping Atheism project myself, because I've been arguing with atheists online for about 10 years now. Yeah,
uh,
10
oh
years.
wow, so it's been a decade goal for you.
And that's not even including the stuff that I did in the activism. That's sarcastic. Did as a kid, which was essentially being part of the see you at the poll thing that happened down in Florida in the mid-90s. It happened all over the South, as far as I was told at the time. But it was I started praying at the flagpole with other Christian children because mainly because of the whole entire narrative that teaching religious teaching your children your religion is child abuse.
Which
And
is ridiculous. No psychological study will ever go to that.
oh yeah, but with single parents, especially single fathers, it you know, just saying that is enough to scare them, because it's with single fathers more than single mothers, you have this fear of your kids being taken away because you're looked at
Yeah.
a lot more closely than the mother is.
With
You're
the sex sense.
yeah, well, it's not just that. It's not just like the feminist type of narrative that that men are more, you know, aggressive, that men only want to have custody of the children to, abuse their children and stuff like that. Luckily enough for me, there is enough a legal precedence in my case to show that didn't happen, but they still always watched for the state always watched for child abuse. And when I say the state, I mean the state of Florida, not the federal government. Like,
So I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like atheists always say this whole thing. That's how I know it's just a catchphrase. They don't mean it. You know that if you make a claim, you have to back it up with evidence. They say that all the time. And they throw that at theists' face. But yet, when a theist catches them and asks them to provide evidence of the BS that they spill, then that's when the agnostic side of them comes out. It's only then. Like, I noticed this about even atheists like T.J. Kirk, better known as the Amazing Atheist. They're agnostic only when questioned. Like, if you watched, I don't know if you watch his content, but if you watch his Black Pigeon Speaks thing, in that video, he goes from, well, I'm just agnostic, an agnostic atheist. I haven't seen any claim, that God exists, evidence that God exists. In the very next video, I believe in either the next video or the next two videos after, he said there is no God. So it's just funny to me that the agnostic part only comes out when questioned.
well, that's more of a trick that they, we can always go back to Anthony Flew here, because this is where it came from. The whole positive claim, positive atheism being disbelief, and negative atheism being non-belief. That's how he split it up. The negative claim that I don't believe is not something that can be proven or should be proven according to Anthony Flew and the atheist proposition. However, the positive claim, the disbelief claim, I disbelieve that gods or God exists. That has to be proven. But in philosophy, both positive and negative claims, there should be some kind of proof, even a rational train of thought.
Well, they tend to go, like, when I go to that link with them, they typically say, well, it's like a court case where, you're innocent until proven guilty. Well, and I say, well, even in a court case, like, if, let's say, for instance, you were going to jail for, like, you were on trial for murder, and I was your lawyer, my case would be to ward against any evidence that would put you in prison and make you not go to prison. I would have to present a good argument for why the evidence that the other side was doing could not be the truth. So even in the court case scenario that they put up, if I simply did nothing and I didn't try to defend you at all, for one, I'd be a bad lawyer. But it'd be incompetent work, because your job is you have to put forward a good argument to show why this is not so.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, it's just with the whole court analogy that's just wrong. Um, with the defense, you still have to prove your innocence. That's why, being able to have an alibi is important, even when you're not going to you don't do anything wrong. Having an alibi, having witnesses saying, well,
I mean,
this person
we have
doesn't
to.
leave the house ever. So, as an example, you have
I
people,
mean, like
you have.
like they'll typically say, well, eyewitness accounts don't count because they want to say there's no evidence for Jesus and stuff, and because there's no the eyewitness accounts. They said, well, eyewitness accounts are better than nothing. Like, of course, when we get eyewitness accounts, we have to, be skeptical. But like, if we were to have a large case number, like let's say for your murder case, if we could have 20 people or 10, like 5 or 6 people that said they seen a person that looked like you, that was wearing clothes like you wear and stuff, it would make it more probable, not absolute, granted, that you were the murderer. It would be better than nothing.
That is true, but me as the accused, so, me as accused, I have the right to bring up my own 5 witnesses that said this is where this person was. He never left. He never left. We can say without a positive, with with a with beyond a shadow of doubt that he never left the house while we were around. You know, um, that's always important to have, though.
Yeah.
Even if you don't do anything wrong, because it's like I've actually seen people be wrongfully accused of something that they didn't do, and they were
Especially nowadays with the rape allegations that always like it gets rarely broadcasted, but there's a lot more than there is.
oh yeah, I mean, I'm not even talking about the rape, just in
Yeah.
general with the legal system. It's always good to have eyewitnesses that will people around you. You don't want it to be false. You don't want people to perjure themselves. But if you have like people around you that can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that you never left a certain place, you could not have possibly committed that burglary, from burglary to murder, to even rape. you know um I've had friends that you know was saved because people were like, no, this guy was at a party at this house, there's this many people, you know we can all attest to it, we can all show them, here's some pictures from the party, stuff like that. It's one of the things that I think that Snapchat stories and stuff like that is good, because you can it's evidence that you were doing something that just in case somebody accuses you of something. Well, you know my Snapchat story, for example, at 10:15 showed that I was at a party, and then my Snapchat story of me leaving, stumbling drunk at 1:30, being carried out by a bunch of people, corroborate that I was there from 10:30 to 1:30. That type of thing is,
Yeah.
is
I mean, eyewitness testimony is good. I mean, like people need to get that we don't really prove anything. Like unless you want to get into the mathematical proofs, we get probabilistic evidence towards a conclusion. We have to take into account, what is the simplest explanation without, multiplying entities, without making leaps and jumps that we do not need to make. What is the most likely answer to be true? And that's all we do. There's no absolute, really. It's just probabilistic.
Oh, I agree. I don't trust anybody that says this is the absolute truth. It's like, how do you know? Like, how do you know? I grew up in an area where there's a lot of fundamentalists, and I cut my teeth, so to speak, on philosophy and arguing with people by arguing with Christian fundamentalists. And, you know, for most people, just arguing with Christian fundamentalists means that, you know, they become atheists for some weird reason. But my arguments were always, you know, you guys are wrong. You know, here's the parts of the Bible that, you know, make me think that you're wrong. Here's, you know, theology from, you know, different types of religions that think that you're wrong. You know, like evangelical orthodox. I'm very sympathetic to evangelical orthodox, because they're people that are working with, you know, the Eastern Orthodox specifically, because they have a hard-on hatred for Catholicism more than any other Protestant denomination I've seen. But they've been working, those types of evangelicals have been working with Eastern Orthodox to make something, you know, more traditional and less like it is. You know, like a lot of evangelical churches, so not all of them, but there's a lot of them that have this
So
Christian.
obviously, you're not one of the anti-Catholic ones.
Well, no, I spent years actually going through, you know, most of my childhood is I come from a denominational family, you know, from a household, you know, my father, who didn't actually teach me about religion. I'd have to go and teach myself and then ask him questions, and he would answer my questions a lot more than my teachers would. A lot of my teachers was like, I can't answer that, you know, on school grounds, I'll get fired. You know, you have that type of fear of atheistic types of activism that I grew up with. And but I've been to Wesleyan churches. That's what my great grandfather was. You know, Lutheran churches. I lived down the street from a Lutheran church until I was 13. And I went there for a little bit. I went to a Catholic church for a little bit, both the Holy Roman Spanish masses and the English speaking masses. Never been to a Latin mass, but you know, that's something that's interesting. Greek Orthodox was something that was really big in the area that I grew up in. I grew up not that far from Tarpon Springs, like on the Gulf side of Florida. You know, Goodfellas, where I grew up at, was shown in Goodfellas, the Wiki Wachi Springs scene. I think that was Goodfellas. I'm not sure. I think that was the only movie that the Wiki Wachi area was actually in a movie. But you know, and it's as far as, you know, Christianity goes, I have a diverse opinion of it. I've been to Unitarian churches during the times when I studied polytheism as well, and it's I came to a specific conclusion, you know, because for a while I wasn't atheist, and I wasn't exactly deist, but I wasn't exactly a practicing any type of religious rituals or anything like that. You could say
basically like a nun.
Something like that, but I still believed in God. I still believed in God and Jesus and all that. It's just it's my whole story is like I searched and then I found something that I'm kind of settling on. I'm, you know, teetering between, you know, Judaism and Greek Orthodoxy. You know,
both good choices, if I may say.
Yeah, I mean, I think
they have a very rich history.
Oh yes, most definitely. I mean, but it's I'm leaning more towards, you know, Greek Orthodox. I've been, you know, I do multi-faith type of stuff, multi-faith groups and stuff like that, where, you know, it's very interesting that throughout my experiences within theism itself, the whole broad range of it, there's so many. It's an intellectually diverse area. There's so much intellectual diversity because even even among biblical literalists, which I'm like I said before, I'm I don't think that's an actual true teaching. And before somebody says no true Scotsman, Christianity itself actually has these rules, these conditions of you can put the conditions of Christianity in an if and or statement, right? Or if and or statement. If I was actually making a program, and if it doesn't match with that, it would be not Christian. And there, like the articles of faith and stuff like that. Like every single denomination has articles of faith that are based on one of the orthodox traditions.
Yeah. People always say, well, there's so many different denominations. Well, not really when you really get down to it. There's a couple hundred when you get down to when you really go each base. They'll say something like there's 10,000 or something denominations, but when you think about it, all they really are is there's specific denominations for certain cities or certain sects, places. They don't really go much outside of Christianity. Like, they pretty much agree with everyone. They're pretty much only a different denomination because they're in a different city or they're in a different country or something like that. Besides that, you could pretty much lump a whole bunch of them in the same place.
Oh yes, most definitely. I mean, when I say denominations, I mean actual,
Oh yeah,
governing body. Because you have the independent denomination with the non.
I would say that there's a couple hundred. Like I say, like when you really get to the nitty gritty, you get like the widely diverse thing. And so you go down from a couple, like the tens of thousands, like atheists and other people say, to maybe around a good 100 or so. Because once you really go down to the nitty gritty and you go like whose interpretations are widely different from each other, that needs more discussion. You get down to like maybe 100 or so more denominations. And even for those specific denominations, that's a difference amongst brothers. And in a way, I can imagine a Christian could say that maybe God wanted it to be like that because he wanted us to encourage us to want to find the truth of him.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that with free will and being able to make our own minds, and and it's like if you get a bunch of people together, right, at a beach, and you look at a sunset, each of those people in that group will describe something different, even though they all saw the same thing. It's the same thing with philosophy. It's the same thing with science. As far as science, I can make an example of done by phys.org and another science journalism that was talking about the Monte Cristo problem, which basically was a computer science document that said, our current technology cannot actually model quantum physics. And then you had like phys.org looking at the same study, at the same thing, and come up with an article that said this proves that we can't possibly live in a virtual reality. And then another website said this proves that we have to be living in a virtual reality simulation. And it's like, it does neither. But you still see it's just the differences of opinions, the differences of people looking at the same thing and just seeing something completely different. Now, whether or not these people see something completely different because they're ignorant of certain things, I don't know. But it's
I mean, like another example I would say is consciousness. Like we were discussing before, like there is such a broad range of views. Like I've legitimately seen where consciousness, if you take the Daniel Dennett view, which people straw man him, he doesn't say consciousness doesn't exist. He says that it's so, feeble that it might as well not exist. You can go from that view to you can go to that the universe has consciousness. So you go legitimately from nothing to everything.
well. Have you ever read anything by Jung, Carl Jung?
Um, I read a couple works. I've been looking actually to get more into him. I've also been going into Sartre, and I've been trying to get into reading the Myth of Sisyphus. I can't say it. But
Uh,
he's definitely someone that I would like to get into.
He is an interesting thing. The collective unconsciousness, for example.
Mm-hmm.
In that book, essentially he was trying to say that our collective subconscious would be God. It's a really interesting book. And I might be misportraying it because it's I read it a long time ago. I'm pulling things out of the depths of my memory here, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of other things that I learned since I read Carl Jung that I've been wanting to go back to it too, actually, because there's um but it was his work is really interesting. I think he was a pantheist, or a lot of his writings were inspired pantheism. Um, and
I think that was a
it's very
popular thing back in his time.
Oh yeah, with quantum
Um,
mechanics, actually, that was the first time that people, when particles was actually, you know, mathematically proven to exist. And at the time, there's a bunch of people that were saying that that's just a Jewish invention, like particles and molecules and atoms. Those that's all Jewish invention. That's all part of the Jewish conspiracy. And not actually looked at, like Prussian science, for example, during World War One to the end of World War One. During Einstein's, while Einstein was actually in school. There's an interesting book. Um, I think it's his autobiography or his biography. I forget who wrote it. I don't know if he wrote it himself or if somebody else wrote it. But it's the his life was very interesting, and if you look at the scientific controversies that was during his time, it was it was a lot it was a lot of arguing back and forth. Well, molecules can't exist, quantum physics can't exist because this, and now we're looking at if in hindsight, because of how far it, because now quantum physics is now in a experimental phase. It's where we can actually observe it, observe
yeah.
things that were mathematically proven before, like atoms. We didn't prove atoms existed until like the 1950s with the electron microscope. And there are people that were skeptical that atoms actually existed. It's looking at the history of science is really interesting, because it's like, well, what are they going to say in 100 years about this topic? Are they going to, who are they going to side with? Who are they going to laugh at? I think they're going to laugh at the atheists, like a lot of people do now, about the Enlightenment era atheists, because they were just a funny lot.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is that people like atheists latch on, they suckle the Enlightenment era as if it was some thing where everyone was an atheist, and just somehow later on they people became religious again. No, Atheism was as rare then as it is now, if not rarer. There was just more, there was more, willing, like freedom for atheists to speak out back then. Um, Although some were, some did fear persecution. Um, like people, I get on Christians that say this too, but technically Isaac Newton wouldn't be considered a Christian. He was an Aryan Christian, which, he didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus. So technically he would be considered a heretic.
Well, that depends on where you in the cities mainly. I've noticed as far as history goes, in the cities that's where the whole heresy thing was mostly concentrated. As far as the outside of that, in academia and in the country where Newton was from, Newton was heavily into like alchemy and stuff like that, and a lot of his work with the human eye, he would experiment on himself, and
Yeah.
and a lot of
He used himself as his own guinea pig.
yeah, and I mean it. He was one of the greatest physicists of that time, but at the same time, it's like, since he was his own subject, it may have may have put biases onto him, and then you have the whole alchemy part, which is misrepresented a lot, because it's like alchemy was about transmutation, changing one thing from one substance to another, and that's a small part of it, but the transmutation that was mostly done was glass blowing, for example, was considered part of the alchemy, was a branch of alchemy at one time. But the more spiritual alchemy, which is what all the evidence points that Isaac Newton actually believed in, it was very much the transmutation of the soul, essentially changing. And in a lot of ways, he more seemed to be a deist. I mean, Aryan Christianity, I'm not really that familiar with it. I know that it is
the basic concept of Aryan Christianity, it would be something more that Muslims could appreciate, where it says that the only difference really is that it believes that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and stuff like that. But they believe that, Jesus was not God. He was a prophet of God. So, technically, it rejects all notions of the Trinity. So, technically, Isaac Newton, like, if we're going by our standards today, he wouldn't be considered he wouldn't be considered a Christian. He would be considered a heretic that believes in a cult of Christianity.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you also have to look at the time period that the Trinity was actually developed. The Trinity was developed in the 1800s. Sir Isaac Newton lived in the 1600s. It's the idea of Trinity was kind of passed around a little bit, but it wasn't accepted. It wasn't an accepted theology. It wasn't an accepted theory until the late 1800s. I forgot Thomas something. It was a Spanish bishop that actually wrote the entire paper on the Trinity, and part of that was kind of what I personally think is a misrepresentation of the Jewish text. But that's my opinion. I mean, I don't reject the Trinity. It's just there's arguments that I'm not going to give people that is against the Trinity. If they haven't come to these arguments themselves, I'm not going to help them out. But I mean, it's
I
ultimately
tend to do a
it's
joke.
okay.
I tend to do a joke with the Trinity. You ever watch that movie, The Human Centipede?
Yes, yes.
That's the Trinity.
Well, yeah, I
Three
understand
three
that joke.
person three persons connected. Three persons are connected as one.
Well, it's not even that. It's a very profound notion, though. I think the idea of the Trinity. Like I can criticize it, but I can also see the validity in it as well.
I can too. I mean, I think it's a very philosophical, as long as profound, stance to take. Um, I can, I have Jewish friends, I have Muslim friends, I have pagan friends, and they'll all say the idea of a trinity is sort of absurd. But I try to tell them also that they have to, you know, be more open and not, try not to be biased towards it. And I say there is some, philosophical validity to it, and there has actually been some Jewish scholars who have put forward that the Trinity has been around in some form since even before Jesus.
Well, you have the more what I would call extremist Jews that says that the Trinity is completely from paganism, and that completely proves that Christianity is a pagan religion. And I don't agree with that at all. It's like the Trinity itself was originally like in the actual biblical Hebrew, you have Adonai, Elohim, and then the name of God that nobody says. The actual pronunciation of that word has been lost to time. I mean,
Yahweh.
well, yes, but that's not. We're not exactly sure on
Mhm.
how to pronounce it. That's it. It's e- e- even Jews would there's even within among Judaism there's an actual scholarly debate on how to pronounce that word. It's so it's not, but but that thing, that the three aspects of God, the Lord part, the
Mhm.
part that rules over us, which is Adonai, and then you have the Elohim, which is more the Holy Spirit, and then
Mhm.
God, as in the being of God,
Mhm.
is the Jehovah, Yahweh, whatever you want to say it. There's no consensus on how to say that word, but
What's
I
funny is, that meme, Yee and Peak, the
yes,
dinosaur.
yes,
I can say, someone can make a meme out of this. I'd say Yee-way, like Yahweh,
I
but Yee-way.
I've actually heard Jews try to um actually say, hey, that's a way that it could be pronounced. It's not something that I mean, Yahweh is we'll just go with that, because that's you know seems to be a consensus among people. But it's good to know that the way that certain words were pronounced, we don't know how they were pronounced anymore. We don't have any audio files from back
Yeah,
when, so
of course, and
we can't say for
language
sure.
can change so much
Yes,
over
yeah.
the course of thousands of years.
Well,
Um, I
even
make a joke too about that. You know, you have Yahweh and his twin brother Noe.
yeah,
Yahweh and Nahweh.
yeah. I mean, but the
I
whole
believe Yahweh
idea.
is like considered. Wasn't that supposed to mean like I am?
Um, no, that was the part of the I am. The part of where God told Moses, I do not need a name. I am. I am. But if you must put a name on me, here is the name here's the name that I give myself, but that's not important. I mean, it just didn't seem like that was the more important thing that I think it was trying to show is
God was more of an action than he was like a personal thing that you could
yeah,
name. If
yeah,
you read into the old Jewish scripture, he was more of an action. Like some Jewish people even say that when you're saying God, what you need to do is put like a hyphen next to him or something, between the O. So because God isn't a noun; it's a verb.
well, yeah, but that's also there's also the reason why that's done in print is more, because you write it down on a piece of paper or put it in a book, right? People throw away books and stuff. People throw away a piece of paper, and to throw away the representation of God is sacrilege.
Yeah.
It's just not done. That's why they do it. But to get back on point, that the whole Trinity thing. Um, you have this aspect and showing that there's three parts of God. There's three actionable parts of God that have three different names. To it's the same being, but it's three different names. And what the Trinity does, as far as I've read, it does that same thing, except for instead of Adonai, Lord, Jesus takes the Adonai part, and then Elohim would be the Holy Spirit, and then like you can see in the transliteration, because there's no actual translations. They're all localized transliterations into English, Spanish, and whatnot. It all differs from. I mean, if you were to actually take the ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek and translate them directly into English, you would have fragmented sentences. It wouldn't make much sense, um, because there's inflection and stuff. There was you know there there's some parts that are lost in translation. Because for many different reasons. I mean, at one time before the World War II, the Jews were very insular people. They didn't want anybody else inside of Judaism, which that wasn't in Judaism. But then, you had people that you had the I wouldn't say Christian. I wouldn't say it was because of Christianity. It was because of certain people that called themselves Christians that just
Yeah.
did not like the Jews, that forced them to convert. Like it happened. There's instances in all over. Like if you were to actually study the history of Messianic Judaism, for example, which is something that I would look at more. I would tell people to look at it a little bit more closely, because Jews for Jesus and stuff like that gave it a bad name. There's actual historical reasoning that this was an actual Christian denomination that came from the time of the prophets, that time of the prophets, time of the apostles, where you had at least one or two of them, at least one or two of the apostles would have kept the Jewish orthodoxy, and, you know but it that's an interesting it's an interesting course of study, because you see in England, for example, Messianic Judaism during the Middle Ages was really suppressed. Like a lot of the kings and lords and stuff within Britannia did not like the Jews. Um, you could see that all throughout Europe too, and it could be multiple different things. I personally think that it's because of the major differences between cultures. The Europeans, Western Europeans, really they they really depended more on swine, on working cheese than beef. I mean, they still had beef and bovine, but it just seems like in Spain and Britain and stuff like that, that pigs were boars and stuff were more, they existed more there. That's where a lot of the cultivation of swine and stuff like that happened. Um, at least in my opinion. I mean, I'm not going to say it's absolute historical fact, because to say that, there's somebody like me out there that will listen and be like, here are the reasons why you were wrong in your assumptions. So I'm not going to say it's absolute truth. I could be wrong, but it just seems like that pig was a very big staple, at least for the rural areas of Western Europe.
Yeah, anti-Semitism, in my opinion, is very stupid. When, like, personally, I believe it should be one of the things that disqualifies you from being a Christian, because Jesus, undoubtedly, unquestionably was a Jew. If you are going to be consistent in your Christianity, and you're going to be an anti-Semite, you have to hate Jesus. But if you hate Jesus, then how can you claim to be a follower of Jesus? So I would consider that somewhat of a disqualifying point. There's no question.
I would agree with that. It's just we're looking at we're looking at the Middle Ages, though. Our sense of morality evolved throughout time.
Yeah.
Because you can.
I don't know if you're a moral realist or not. I mean, some people would say that, like Inspiring Philosophy, who I very much enjoy his work, he would take the stance that they weren't wrong, they just didn't have the correct information, in the sense they were naive. We're all working towards, the absolute good. We just don't know it.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, me personally, I'm more like morality evolved. Morality is an evolved portion of us. You can't really get away from morality. You can't. If you try to actually separate yourself from morality, you're usually called a psychopath, because it is we whether it's created or not, it seems to be an instinctive thing. It seems to be like this. We know that killing other humans is wrong. I mean, we could objectively see that it is wrong, because even in cases of self-defense where there's legitimate self-defense and you're going to die, it happens among veterans. That's the experience I have with that. But these veterans know that the people that are shooting at them, we're trying to kill them, but they still have it still damages them. Moral damage, and psychological damage comes from taking a life. I mean, science has proven this. There's
PTSD is very common amongst veterans.
Yes.
I actually myself have a grandfather that, fought in the Vietnam War, and, give lots of mad respect to him for doing that. Because, unlike the current Iraqi war, like, the veterans of Vietnam were treated pretty much like, crap. My grandpa would tell me all stories about it, about how when he first came back from his his tours, he would he got pelted on by people, he got called names, he got called a murderer, a horrible person, and he didn't even like the war when he was there. He I mean, he loved fighting for his country. That's what he did. But I mean, he didn't approve of some of the stuff that America did, but he, had a commitment as a soldier. But, it was bad because, he got no respect once he came back.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Vietnam War was
Crazy.
oh yeah, it was crazy, but there's